This high priest, in broad daylight, brazenly entered the pharaoh's concubine's chambers and committed an act of public indecency with the pharaoh's alluring queen. Little did they know that in the heat of passion, the pharaoh suddenly returned to the palace earlier than expected. Though the high priest had just in time as the pharaoh entered, Anck-su-namun couldn't conceal her anxiety. In the next moment, the pharaoh sensed something was wrong and asked his queen who had touched her. Before she could answer, the high priest, Imhotep, appeared behind the pharaoh. The pharaoh was utterly shocked to discover that the culprit was none other than his own high priest. With their secret exposed, Imhotep and Anck-su-namun had no choice but to kill the pharaoh together. The pharaoh's screams quickly attracted the guards, and while Imhotep was smuggled away by his followers, Anck-su-namun, knowing she couldn't escape death, chose to end her own life. After escaping, Imhotep, determined to resurrect Anck-su-namun, led his followers into the tomb and stole her corpse. He then set off into the desert under the cover of night, heading for the city of the dead, the burial site of Egypt's pharaohs throughout history. Among the many burial items, Imhotep retrieved the Black Book of the Dead, preparing to summon Anck-su-namun's soul back from the underworld. The ritual began smoothly, but at the crucial moment, the pharaoh's guards burst in, interrupting the ceremony. Having murdered the pharaoh and trespassed into the tomb, Imhotep and his followers were condemned for multiple offenses. His priests were mummified alive, while Imhotep was sentenced to the curse of the Hamdi. This was the most sinister of all ancient curses, and Imhotep became the first to undergo this punishment. After being wrapped in bandages and placed in a sarcophagus, the executioners poured a jar of scarabs into the coffin. This meant Imhotep's soul would be eternally sealed within the sarcophagus. Due to the horror of the curse of the Hamdi, any soul punished this way, if released, would become a creature of immense power, capable of bringing devastation to the world. To prevent this from happening, a guard was assigned to watch over the buried sarcophagus. With the relentless passing of time, the year was now 1923. By this time, Egypt had become a British colony, and on the land of Hamunaptra, a fierce battle erupted between a treasure-hunting team and the local militia. As the leader of the team, O'Connell stood ready with his companions, but with the overwhelming strength of the opposing force, O'Connell's superior officer quickly fled without even engaging. Seeing the approaching enemy, Benny decided his life was more important, immediately abandoning his weapon and running away. O'Connell ordered his team to open fire, and while it seemed effective at first, the sheer number of enemies soon overwhelmed them. As they ran out of ammunition, the team's defenses were breached. O'Connell fought while retreating, originally intending to hide in a cave with Benny, but adhering to the principle of every man for himself. Benny locked the door behind him after entering the cave. With no other choice, O'Connell fled while searching for a new hiding spot. Along the way, he lost his weapon and was surrounded by the enemy. Desperately, O'Connell ran to a statue, and just as he closed his eyes, accepting his fate, the soldiers pursuing him suddenly stopped. The horses were startled by something unseen, and after glancing at the statue, the soldiers turned and left. Once the area was calm, O'Connell opened his eyes, realizing he was standing in front of a statue of Anubis, the god of death. Thinking he had narrowly escaped, O'Connell suddenly heard a strange sound, and the sand beneath his feet began to move. Panicked, O'Connell fled, unaware of the terrifying face forming in the sand, the face of Imhotep, who had been buried here 3,000 years ago. During the skirmish between the treasure hunters and the militia, another group watched from a high point. They were the descendants of the pharaoh's guards, stationed here to prevent Imhotep's release. Seeing O'Connell miraculously escape, one of the guards asked if they should intervene, but the leader stopped them. In his view, no one could escape this desert alive. 3 years later, in Cairo's Antiquities Museum, librarian Evelyn was organizing books. What was usually a dull job was filled with all sorts of excitement thanks to Evelyn's presence. While placing a book back on the shelf, Evelyn tried to take a shortcut, but the next moment, the ladder tipped over. She struggled to keep her balance but ultimately fell, causing the bookshelves to topple over like dominoes. Hearing the commotion, the museum director rushed over, shocked at the scene before him, but upon seeing Evelyn, he seemed resigned to such accidents, his words tinged with helplessness. The director regretted hiring her on a whim, but Evelyn quickly explained that she was employed because she was good enough. It turns out Evelyn could read and write ancient Egyptian and interpret hieroglyphics used by priests. Besides that, she was the only one within miles who could correctly catalog and index the museum's items. However, the director pointed out that she should thank her parents for their generous donations, which was why he tolerated her. With that, he sighed and walked away. Just then, Evelyn heard a noise behind her. She entered the mummy display room and found that the sound was coming from inside a sarcophagus. Fortunately, it wasn't a mummy coming to life, but just her brother Jonathan's prank. Seeing Evelyn upset, Jonathan pulled out a gift he had bought, saying it had caught his eye immediately. Evelyn, who was fascinated by ancient Egyptian history and dreamed of becoming an archaeologist, was intrigued when the box suddenly opened to reveal a map inside. Evelyn quickly reported her discovery to the director, explaining that the markings on the map indicated the seal of Pharaoh Seti I. She believed that the writing might describe the location of Hamunaptra. However, the director sternly rebuffed her. "We are scholars, not adventurers," he said, though Jonathan was fully convinced by his sister's words. Excited about the treasure at Hamunaptra, Jonathan wanted to leave immediately, but at that moment, the director accidentally burned the map, right at the spot marking Hamunaptra's location. Even so, nothing could quell the siblings' curiosity about Hamunaptra. Though the map was destroyed, Jonathan had another map. The box wasn't something he bought. It was something he took from a drunkard. Through inquiries, they learned that the drunkard had been imprisoned, so Evelyn and Jonathan went to the prison to find him. That drunkard was O'Connell. Though Evelyn asked about the box, O'Connell knew she wanted to know the location of Hamunaptra. He admitted that the box was found in Hamunaptra, which piqued Evelyn's curiosity even more. However, O'Connell didn't expect that instead of getting the information, he would lose his first kiss. Angry at his forwardness, Evelyn realized that O'Connell was the only one who knew the exact location, so she decided to save him. She negotiated with the warden, but the greedy and lustful warden developed an interest in Evelyn. When Evelyn refused, the warden immediately ordered O'Connell's execution. Hearing the cheers around her and seeing O'Connell in danger, Evelyn had no choice but to reveal the secret to the warden. She promised to give the warden 30% of the treasure once they found it. So the warden spared O'Connell. With the treasure hunting team assembled, they quickly set off on their journey. Evelyn was still upset about the incident, but after O'Connell cleaned up, she suddenly found him more attractive. All four of them were eager for the adventure ahead, but they didn't know that another group on the ship was also searching for Hamunaptra. Additionally, a small boat full of black-robed men was slowly approaching. The night on the sea was a bit dull, and the passengers gathered to play cards. Hearing that the other men were also searching for Hamunaptra, O'Connell immediately suspected Jonathan had leaked the information, and as he guessed, the men challenged O'Connell to a race to see who would reach Hamunaptra first. They were confident because they had a guide who had been there before. O'Connell didn't need to think twice to know it was his old friend, Benny. Knowing exactly what Benny was like, O'Connell took the opportunity to throw him overboard when he wasn't looking, but O'Connell quickly realized something was wrong. Footprints appeared on the deck, as if someone had climbed aboard from the sea. Meanwhile, in her cabin, Evelyn was still troubled by the kiss. As she bent down to pick something up, she stood up to find a black-robed man behind her. He asked where the map was, where the key was. At that moment, O'Connell, who sensed danger, arrived but didn't expect that the man had accomplices. The man in black immediately took Evelyn hostage. However, in the next second, a candle burned the man in black's eye, and the room quickly caught fire. The man in black intended to leave but then noticed a box on the ground. It turned out this box was the key he was looking for, but just as he was about to pick it up, Jonathan barged in and knocked him away. The flames then engulfed the man in black. Jonathan tried to take the key but was outpaced by the man in black. Seeing that their actions were exposed, the other men in black no longer hid and started setting fires all over the ship. The passengers, in a bid to survive, had no choice but to jump into the water. O'Connell and Evelyn also made their way to the deck. After throwing Evelyn overboard in a princess carry, O'Connell prepared to jump in as well. At that moment, a man in black jumped out from the side, and the two quickly engaged in a fight. In the end, O'Connell kicked the man in black into the burning room, and the prison warden followed suit. Jumping into the water, everyone was focused on escaping, but the men they were traveling with had established a stronghold and were fighting back against the men in black, even saving Jonathan's life at a critical moment. As one of the men in black fell into the water, Jonathan took the key from his body. Seeing that the fire was too intense and the ship was about to explode, everyone had no choice but to jump into the water. O'Connell and the others reached the shore, but Benny appeared and mocked them. He said he had all the horses, but O'Connell replied that he had landed on the wrong shore and that it was all in vain. Having lost their supplies, O'Connell and the others decided to head to the market. Jonathan haggled for a while and eventually bought 4 camels at a price higher than the market rate. Meanwhile, after changing into local attire, Evelyn had O'Connell completely captivated. Once everything was ready, the four of them set off on their adventure again. After crossing a desert that spanned thousands of miles, O'Connell and the others finally arrived near their destination and encountered a treasure hunting team led by Benny. The other side brought up their previous bet, and O'Connell was full of confidence. As the sun slowly rose, the silhouette of Hamunaptra finally appeared on a clearing in the distance. Everyone was eager, hoping to become the next millionaire. With O'Connell's help, Evelyn became the first person to enter Hamunaptra, though it wasn't particularly significant. It did win her the bet and $500. After the little speed contest, both sides began their formal treasure hunt. The Americans set up tents inside the city, looking as though they intended to empty the place out. Meanwhile, Evelyn and her group went to the vicinity of the Anubis statue, where she explained that archaeologists had once studied that the legs of the statue extended into the ground. It was said that there was a secret chamber there containing two great books from ancient Egyptian culture, the Book of the Sun and the Book of the Dead. It was believed that the Book of the Sun was hidden beneath the statue, which was also Evelyn's goal for this trip. Once everything was ready, the group descended to the base of the statue. By adjusting an ancient mirror, they reflected the sunlight from outside into the chamber, allowing them to see their surroundings clearly. As they explored further, they heard a rustling sound, as if insects were crawling around, but since no one saw anything with their own eyes, they didn't pay it much mind. After finally finding the legs of the statue buried deep underground, the Americans soon caught up with them. O'Connell refused to back down, but at that moment, Evelyn noticed something and quickly pulled the group away. They went to another location, preparing to dig from there. Meanwhile, Jonathan realized that the prison warden had disappeared at some point. As it turned out, the warden had embarked on his personal treasure hunt after the two sides had clashed. He crawled through a passage and arrived at a stone wall, eyeing the blue gold embedded in it. Without hesitation, he pulled out a knife and started prying it out. One by one, he went to work, thoroughly enjoying himself. But he didn't notice that as one piece of gold fell to the ground, a scarab beetle hatched from it and crawled into his shoe. The warden quickly felt something was wrong and tried to grab it with his hand, but to no avail. The scarab burrowed into his body, moving from his belly to his face, and finally up into his brain. Meanwhile, the Americans found a compartment at the base of the statue. One man was about to pry it open when the doctor in the group stopped him. He believed the compartment was likely booby-trapped, and such dangerous tasks should be left to the workers. Reluctantly, the workers did as they were told. Even though they were unwilling, as the doctor had predicted, the compartment was opened, but the high-pressure hydrochloric acid inside dissolved 3 workers on the spot. On O'Connell's side, there was also a breakthrough discovery. Jonathan, by accident, triggered some mechanism. A sarcophagus, buried beneath the statue, suddenly fell down. Evelyn explained to the two that there were only 2 possible scenarios for someone being buried in a place like this. Either the person was of noble lineage, or they had committed heinous crimes during their lifetime. Seeing the groove on the sarcophagus, Evelyn suddenly thought of the key the man in black had mentioned that night. She took out the box from her bag, opened it, and placed it in the groove, and sure enough, it fit perfectly. At that moment, the prison warden's screams echoed from outside. The 3 went out and found the warden acting erratically. He then ran headlong into a stone wall and collapsed, lifeless. Nightfall quickly came, and both groups returned to the surface. When Jonathan was rummaging through the warden's bag, all he found was a bottle of good wine, with the scarab beetle inside having vanished. Soon, a team of men burst into Hamunaptra. It was the same group of men in black who had launched a surprise attack on the ship. The leader fought with O'Connell before calling off his men but warned the treasure hunters to leave immediately. But his warning only reinforced everyone's belief that there must be treasure buried here. The next day, at dawn, both groups descended underground again. The Americans extracted a box covered in runes from the compartment they had opened the previous day. The experienced doctor noted that the box was covered in ancient Egyptian curses. A terrifying howl echoed around them, accompanied by a chilling breeze. The workers, unable to bear it any longer, chose their lives over money and fled. The Americans scoffed at the curses, but inwardly, they were also getting cold feet. The doctor then translated the curse written on the box. It warned that the box contained something dreadful, and if it were released, it would kill everyone. Hearing that something even more terrifying was sealed inside, Danny, driven by greed, was so scared by these words that he stumbled back, muttering about the curse as he turned and fled. The Americans, however, ignored the warning and recklessly opened the box. Inside was the Book of the Dead and several canopic jars used to store internal organs. Meanwhile, O'Connell and his group used the key to open the sarcophagus. The man then forcefully pried open the 1,000-year-old coffin. To their shock, a mummy suddenly popped out from inside. Even more astonishing was that, despite being dead for 3,000 years, the mummy's skin was still pink and tender, like a child's. At that moment, O'Connell noticed that the interior of the sarcophagus was covered in scratch marks, indicating that the mummy before them had been entombed alive. Moreover, a death curse had been inscribed on the right side of the sarcophagus. Seeing the mummy behind them, the three suddenly had a bad feeling. Little did they know that from that moment on, the evil high priest Imhotep would return to the world. That night, as they passed by the American camp, Evelyn saw the doctor trying to open the Book of the Dead he had found in the tomb, and her curiosity was piqued. So, after everyone had fallen asleep, Evelyn took the Book of the Dead from the doctor. She discovered that it, too, required a key to open, just like before. As soon as the book was opened, a cold wind suddenly swept through the area. Evelyn, thinking that reading more books could do no harm, didn't realize that this would bring about a great disaster. The book was filled with ancient Egyptian texts, which were right in Evelyn's wheelhouse. Out of habit, she instinctively began translating aloud as she read. Dr. woke up and yelled, "Don't read it out loud." Although the doctor woke up in time, it was already too late. Imhotep's soul had been released. The group, who had been sound asleep, was startled awake. They looked at the dark mass in the distance, bewildered. It wasn't until the mass came closer that they realized it was a swarm of locusts. To survive, everyone rushed underground, but the slower workers and the doctor were quickly surrounded by the locust army. Once underground, the group scattered in panic. Someone lost their glasses in the chaos, and being extremely nearsighted, he lost his way and could only call out for help. But the next second, his glasses were crushed under Benny's foot. With no other choice, he had to feel his way forward. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was nearby. Suddenly, a shadow flashed, and the man let out a horrific scream. Meanwhile, O'Connell and his group were not faring much better. They encountered scarabs along the way. Seeing the endless stream of bugs, the three felt a chill run down their spines. As they ran across a bridge, O'Connell and Jonathan jumped to one side. Evelyn, however, jumped to the other side and accidentally triggered a mechanism, falling into a secret chamber behind her. It wasn't until the scarab swarm passed that O'Connell realized Evelyn was missing. Fortunately, Evelyn wasn't hurt and even encountered a lone man, but when the man turned around, Evelyn was shocked. He had lost his eyes, and his tongue had been bitten off. The culprit, Imhotep, then emerged from the darkness, but upon seeing Evelyn, Imhotep called out the name of his lover, Anxunaman. He even extended his hand gallantly, inviting Evelyn to come with him. Just then, O'Connell, who had been evading the scarab swarm, passed by. When he saw Imhotep's true face, even someone as seasoned as him was taken aback. Imhotep mistook Evelyn for Anxunaman and was clearly displeased with O'Connell standing beside her. Seeing a mummy daring to shout at him, O'Connell didn't back down and shouted back, then shot Imhotep, sending him flying. Taking advantage of this, the group hurriedly followed O'Connell out, but as soon as they stepped outside, they were ambushed by men in black. The leader told O'Connell and his group that they had released a 3,000-year-old monster, and now everyone was doomed. Since Imhotep didn't belong to this world, human weapons were useless against him. The leader handed the man, who had lost his eyes and tongue, to his American comrades and then led his men underground. As descendants of Pharaoh's guards, it was their duty to eliminate Imhotep. Elsewhere, Benny, who had lost his way from the group, stumbled into the room where the Book of the Dead was first discovered. Imhotep appeared silently behind him. To save his own life, Benny began praying to all the gods, and to his surprise, it actually worked. It turns out knowing multiple languages is indeed useful. Thus, lured by the promise of wealth, Benny became Imhotep's lackey. His first task was to help Imhotep find the other sacred jars. Upon safely returning to Cairo, O'Connell and Evelyn had a disagreement. O'Connell had fallen for Evelyn and wanted to end the journey and take her away from there, but Evelyn felt they should stay and help destroy Imhotep, or the consequences would be unimaginable. The two argued, and in a fit of anger, O'Connell turned and left. He went to the bar to drown his sorrows with Jonathan. At that moment, two Americans approached. They deeply regretted their earlier actions, as the fate of their comrade was too horrific. Just thinking about it now sent shivers down their spines. Little did they know, Benny had already brought Imhotep to their side. To regain his former handsome appearance, Imhotep needed to find the four men who took the sacred jars, drain their blood, and take their organs. This was the curse written on the box, but no one paid any attention to it. Imhotep's first target was one of the men. As a scream echoed, the first ritual ended successfully. Meanwhile, in the hotel lobby, The men who were drinking all spat out their drinks at the same time. They realized, to their horror, that their wine had somehow turned into blood. O'Connell reacted quickly, guessing that Imhotep had come for them, but before he could warn Evelyn, disaster struck the land. Fiery hail fell from the sky, destroying buildings and burning people. It was at that moment that O'Connell spotted Benny. Knowing him well, O'Connell knew nothing good would come from it. Suddenly, a roar echoed from upstairs, and Benny took the opportunity to escape. O'Connell, however, armed himself and went up to investigate, only to find the man who had been drained dry. Nearby, Imhotep had partially regained his original appearance due to the blood nourishment. O'Connell fired at him, but it had no effect. Instead, Imhotep easily pushed him aside. Imhotep slowly approached Evelyn, thanking her for releasing him and attempting to give her a passionate kiss, but a cat that suddenly appeared nearby scared Imhotep half to death, forcing him to flee as a sandstorm. Knowing she had caused trouble, Evelyn didn't plan to shirk responsibility, but the immediate task was to figure out who Imhotep was and how to destroy him. The only person who could answer that was the museum curator. But when Evelyn and the others arrived, they found that the leader of the men in black, who had tried to stop them earlier, was also there. With things having reached this point, the curator no longer held back. He revealed that he and the leader belonged to an ancient secret organization that had guarded the city of the dead for 3,000 years to prevent the high priest Imhotep from returning to the world of the living. Recalling the recent events, O'Connell voiced his concerns. The curator explained that those who opened the box were cursed and were doomed to die. Evelyn told the curator and the leader about Imhotep calling her Anxunaman and his attempt to kiss her. Their faces turned pale upon hearing this because the main reason Imhotep was sentenced to the punishment of being eaten by scarabs was his love for Anxunaman. With Imhotep's resurrection, the unfinished resurrection ritual from the past would undoubtedly be attempted again. The reason Imhotep treated Evelyn differently from others wasn't out of love but because he had chosen Evelyn as the vessel to resurrect Anxunaman. Though this was bad news, it also gave the curator and the others more time to devise a plan. At that moment, the sky showed further signs of Imhotep's growing power, proving that his strength was increasing. With time running out, Evelyn and O'Connell immediately took action. They needed to find out which Americans had been cursed for opening the box. Besides the two people present and the glasses man who had already been drained, the only one left was the doctor. No one had seen the doctor since they parted ways in Hamunaptra. Moreover, the doctor had the Book of the Dead, which was essential for the resurrection ritual, so they had to find him before Imhotep did. O'Connell left the two Americans and Evelyn at the hotel for protection while he and Jonathan went to find the doctor. But first, they needed to locate Benny. After a friendly exchange, Benny revealed Imhotep's intentions. As the curator and the others had suspected, Imhotep wanted to retrieve the Book of the Dead to resurrect Anxunaman. At that moment, a scream echoed from afar. By the time O'Connell and the others reached the source, the doctor had already been turned into a dried corpse. Imhotep's body had begun to regain flesh. Spotting O'Connell and Jonathan by the window, Imhotep opened his mouth and unleashed a swarm of locusts. The locusts descended on the streets, draining the blood of the people in an instant. But Imhotep wasn't satisfied and casually passed through the crowd, making his way to an apartment. With a wave of sand, the apartment's resident instantly turned into a dried corpse. Meanwhile, Evelyn, who was sleeping next door, was unaware of what was happening outside. It wasn't until Imhotep, in the form of sand, slipped through the keyhole and approached her bed to kiss her that Evelyn was startled awake. When O'Connell arrived and saw this, he immediately held up the old cat, causing Imhotep to flee in terror once again. But Imhotep wasn't going to give up. Since he was afraid of cats, he decided to let someone who wasn't afraid do the job. Under his influence and control, the people of the city took up torches and turned against O'Connell and his group. They chanted Imhotep's name, becoming emotionless slaves. As the museum was surrounded, Evelyn suddenly had an idea. Since the Book of the Dead could bring the dead back to life, perhaps the Book of the Sun might contain a way to destroy Imhotep. After translating the ancient Egyptian stele, Evelyn indeed made a discovery. The Book of the Sun was hidden inside the statue of R.A. Jonathan ran outside to start the car and, by sheer coincidence, encountered the bewitched townspeople. Thinking quickly, he chose to disguise himself and began shouting Imhotep's name. Once the immediate danger was over, he turned and started the car. But just as he rejoined O'Connell and the others, Benny spotted them, exposing their location. At Imhotep's command, the townspeople began to pursue them, even setting up a pincer movement. O'Connell, a battle-hardened veteran, immediately floored the gas and sped off. Though this method worked well, some of the fearless townspeople took the opportunity to climb onto the car. Despite O'Connell and the leader's strong combat abilities, they were unable to cover all angles, and the last American was eventually dragged from the vehicle, with the blood drained from him. Imhotep eagerly anticipated his full resurrection. When the screams rang out for the fourth time, Imhotep completed his resurrection and was no longer afraid of cats. Meanwhile, O'Connell and his group were also in trouble. Although the car's four wheels were fast, they had to yield under constant pursuit. Soon, they were surrounded, and the fully resurrected Imhotep appeared. Under Benny's translation, Imhotep stated his terms. He wanted Evelyn to go with him. In exchange, he would release everyone. Evelyn approached Imhotep, as this seemed to be the only way to save everyone. However, after taking Evelyn and obtaining the key, Imhotep ordered the immediate execution of O'Connell and the others. O'Connell discovered another passage and forcefully opened a manhole cover, allowing Jonathan and the others to go first. The curator was supposed to follow, but in an effort to buy more time, the curator chose to sacrifice himself. Imhotep needed to perform the summoning ritual at Hamunaptra. With his 1,000-year-old powers, he could go wherever he wished in no time. However, O'Connell was not so fortunate. Considering the increasing danger to Evelyn, O'Connell had to find another way to travel. He sought help from his old friend Winston. As a former royal pilot now retired, Winston felt he had lost his purpose in life and spent his days drinking. So when he heard about a mission to rescue a beautiful woman, kill the bad guys, and save the world, he agreed without hesitation. The four of them quickly set out, but due to the limited seating on the plane, they had to travel in a front-back, left-right arrangement. As they neared Hamunaptra, the plane encountered a sandstorm. Winston and O'Connell shared that they had never seen such a massive one before. Little did they know, the sandstorm was so unusual because it was created by Imhotep. Thus, the two groups almost arrived at Hamunaptra simultaneously, but upon seeing the plane above, Imhotep suddenly cast a spell to lift the sand high into the air. To avoid crashing, O'Connell instructed Winston to push the throttle to the maximum. Unfortunately, they were still caught in the storm, and although O'Connell and the others survived, Winston was eager to leave as soon as possible. To save her loved ones and her brother, Evelyn had to sacrifice herself to interrupt Imhotep's spell. Seeing the plane crash into the sand, Imhotep left satisfied. The massive impact split the plane in two. O'Connell and the others were mostly unharmed, but Winston left with a smile on his face. For him, spending the final moments of life engaged in his greatest passion was the greatest happiness. Later, as they cleared the tunnel entrance, Jonathan noticed scarabs on the wall, similar to those from the prison warden. He thought they might be valuable, but the next moment, he regretted it. The scarabs emerged from their shells and crawled into his body. Fortunately, O'Connell noticed in time and used a knife to extract them, but this also exposed their location. Imhotep, busy preparing the summoning ritual, summoned his former monks to deal with O'Connell and his group. Meanwhile, O'Connell and the others inadvertently walked into a room filled with burial goods. Jonathan had only seen such a dazzling scene in his dreams. As he was too amazed to speak, a mummy responsible for silencing intruders emerged from the ground. Under the intense barrage of bullets, the mummies were reduced to a pulp, but they got up and continued the chase, deeply committed to their duties from life. During the fight and retreat, the three finally located the statue of the sun god. The mummies trailing behind were completely blown to pieces by O'Connell's bombs. Unexpectedly, more mummies kept coming in waves. The leader voluntarily went to deal with them, allowing O'Connell and Jonathan to focus on opening the compartment under the sun god's feet. Fortunately, Evelyn's earlier deduction was correct. The Book of the Dead was indeed hidden there. Meanwhile, Imhotep had begun the summoning ritual. He arranged Evelyn and Anxunamon's bodies together and began chanting from the Book of the Dead. Soon, Anxunamon's soul was summoned from the underworld and returned to her original body. At the same time, Imhotep approached Evelyn with a knife. Just as he was about to act, Jonathan arrived with the Book of the Dead. Hearing the name of the book, Imhotep immediately lost his composure. Taking advantage of his distraction, O'Connell came from behind and severed Evelyn's chains. Imhotep, enraged and embarrassed, ordered all his minions to attack. The mummy problem was temporarily resolved. Jonathan, after some searching, managed to summon the guardian spirits. Perhaps due to a language barrier, the guardian spirits chose to obey Imhotep's orders and began pursuing O'Connell. Meanwhile, Anxunamon, unable to wait, started attacking Evelyn. All the pressure now fell on Jonathan. Although he could recognize ancient Egyptian writing, he was still not as adept as his sister Evelyn. He finally found the spell to solve the problem but was stuck on the last symbol and had to seek Evelyn's help. At the last moment before the Guardian's weapon struck, Jonathan managed to recite the spell, causing Imhotep to panic. Seeing his sister being harmed, Jonathan commanded the guardians to eliminate Anxunamun. Imhotep, desperate to get the Book of the Dead, tried to stop the guardians, but it was too late. Watching the guardians stab Anxunamun repeatedly, Imhotep's eyes were filled with hatred. He lunged at Jonathan, but O'Connell arrived just in time to sever his arm. Thinking of all the times Imhotep had thwarted his plans, O'Connell decided to deal with him first. However, Jonathan managed to snatch the key from Imhotep during their brief contact. With the key, Evelyn opened the Book of the Dead and began searching for the spell to defeat Imhotep. O'Connell was tasked with buying time, but after several rounds of combat, his strength began to wane. Just as Imhotep was about to devour him, Evelyn finally found the spell. As she spoke the final words, the underworld chariot appeared. As it passed through Imhotep's body, it drained his powers. Refusing to concede, Imhotep tried to fight O'Connell, but forgot his own dire situation. Pierced by weapons, Imhotep faced death once again. While Evelyn and the others were reflecting, the stone walls around them suddenly began to move. It seemed that a switch had been activated, and the culprit was Benny. It turned out that from the moment O'Connell and the others entered the tomb, Benny had secretly followed them. He discovered the room filled with burial goods and, while everyone else fought Imhotep, Benny eagerly collected gold, silver, and jewels. However, his greed was insatiable, triggering the tomb's traps. In the end, Benny achieved his goal and spent the rest of his life surrounded by wealth. On the other side, after experiencing a high-speed escape, O'Connell and the others finally safely exited Hamunaptra. The leader had already been waiting outside. After bidding farewell to the three, he ventured back into the depths of the desert. O'Connell and Evelyn finally became a couple, while Jonathan, gazing at the collapsed Hamunaptra, lamented that their journey had ended in vain. However, as they mounted their camels for the return trip, they discovered a surprise prepared by Benny in their package. Under the sunlight, it gleamed with a golden glow. Every journey has a beginning and an end. Just as Imhotep's words in the Annals of Rick said, "Death is a new beginning, and the stories of Egypt and the mummies will soon set out once again from this place." These are a group of monsters with the heads of dogs and bodies of men. They are the death gods Anubis's army of death. After 5,000 years of slumber, they are once again waging war upon the world alongside their master. The pharaoh's guards, clad in black, gather on the battlefield, vowing not to let the army of death step 1 foot beyond the desert. What seems to be an unwinnable battle for the pharaoh's guards is met with a spirit of fighting to the death. As the battle begins, both sides charge and shout. Wherever the guards' scimitars strike, the enemies turn to yellow sand. In the face of their unwavering resolve, even the army of death seems to be terrified. They scatter and flee, and those who are surrounded turn into yellow sand as well. As the guards celebrate their victory, the enormous Scorpion King, who has been sleeping within a giant pyramid, awakens at this very moment. Soon, the guards see more of the army of death pouring in from a distance, this time overwhelming in number. Why does Anubis's army follow the Scorpion King's orders? And what has awakened him after 5,000 years? Over 5,000 years ago, an extraordinary figure emerged in ancient Egypt. He was 8 feet tall with a waist of 10 tails. With just a call, countless followers would rally to him. He was known in the underworld as the Scorpion King. The Scorpion King was a valiant warrior with a formidable army. He waged wars everywhere, determined to rule the world. But ancient wisdom says that warmongers are destined to perish. When he led his troops to attack the mighty city of Thebes, he faced fierce resistance from the regular army. His forces, unable to breach the city, laid siege for 7 years. In those 7 years of conflict, his ambition was thwarted. It was his first major defeat. To save his life, he retreated with his remaining troops to the sacred Amsha Desert. The harsh desert conditions, with scarce water and food, caused his once mighty soldiers to fall one by one. Eventually, only the Scorpion King remained alone. As he neared death, he still couldn't accept his fate. He swore to Anubis, the god of death, that if he could be saved and help reclaim Thebes, he would offer his soul. Remarkably, the god of death agreed and sent him a scorpion for sustenance. The Scorpion King, despite his disgust, ate the scorpion and made the pact with the god of death. In the next moment, under the god's divine power, lush vegetation suddenly sprouted in the barren desert. Tall trees sprang up, covering miles in an instant. A dense oasis formed, and not only did the god of death give him new life, but he also granted him an army of death from the underworld. From then on, the Scorpion King was known as the Scorpion Emperor, leading Anubis's army of death. He was unstoppable, Even the mightiest city of Thebes couldn't resist the onslaught. Within half a day, the city fell, and no force could challenge him. The Scorpion Emperor finally achieved his goal, but at a cost. At the height of his triumph, the pact began to be fulfilled. Anubis, as promised, took his soul and dragged him to hell. All that remained was a golden bracelet lying on the ground, while the army of death dissolved into dust, returning to slumber beneath the sands until summoned again. Fast forward 5,000 years, and O'Connell and archaeologist Evelyn, with their son Alex, returned to this place. After their adventure in Egypt in the previous film, O'Connell and Evelyn returned to London, married, and had a chubby little boy. The family lived happily, but recently, Evelyn had been dreaming of the pharaoh's tomb, as if it were a memory from a past life. Believing the mummy incident was a sign, Evelyn was determined to uncover the truth. The family returned to Egypt to explore the pharaoh's tomb from her dreams. During their research, Alex noticed that the patterns on the tomb walls were very similar to the tattoos on his father's arm. O'Connell, dismissive of the coincidence, let his son guard the entrance while he and Evelyn went deeper to search for treasure. However, Evelyn, familiar with the terrain, quickly found an entrance to a burial chamber. When O'Connell violently smashed open the stone door, he saw that the floor was covered in scorpions and human bones. Though it was not new to Evelyn, the familiar sight gave her a sense of coming home. Guided by her memory, she unknowingly opened the main door of the tomb. As O'Connell entered the mummy's tomb, Evelyn suddenly felt a wave of dizziness. Everything around her suddenly changed, and in a daze, she saw a vision of her past life. In a lavishly decorated chamber, a mysterious box sat between two strong guards. She could clearly see the code to unlock the chamber, but when O'Connell approached, the vision vanished. The structure of the pharaoh's tomb was almost identical to what Evelyn had seen in her dreams. She even faintly felt that she had been here in ancient times, but her husband O'Connell didn't believe her. Yet, Evelyn effortlessly opened the door, leaving O'Connell completely astonished. At that moment, 3 mercenaries received their orders and also arrived at the site. Alex, hiding in the shadows, overheard their conversation and discovered they were there to target his father. The leader ordered his men to stay behind in the temple, but he himself intended to kill O'Connell. Mischievous Alex hid and used a slingshot to play a trick on them. Terrified, they thought it was some kind of curse, while Alex giggled to himself. But when he tried the same trick again, he was caught, and the man was ready to teach him a lesson. Inside the chamber, they brushed aside cobwebs and saw the emblem of the Scorpion King, and there, they found a mysterious box also marked with the Scorpion King's emblem. Driven by curiosity, Evelyn opened the box using the same method. Inside was none other than the legendary bracelet of Anubis. It was said that whoever possessed the bracelet could summon the Scorpion King and, by killing him, gain control of the powerful army of Anubis. Just as the mercenary leader found them and was about to shoot, the chamber suddenly shook violently. Terrified, the mercenary leader fled. O'Connell realized it might be a curse and quickly examined the surface of the box. Sure enough, there was an inscription that read, "Whoever opens this box will be drowned by the waters of the Nile." Before he could finish reading, the walls collapsed, and a massive flood from the Nile burst into the tomb, blocking the couple's escape. The 3 mercenaries, too scared to deal with Alex, hurriedly fled. As he left, the man angrily kicked down the scaffolding, hoping to trap the boy. O'Connell grabbed Evelyn, and they frantically ran through the tomb. But in the end, they were cornered by the floodwaters, and the entire underground palace was submerged by the Nile, trapping the couple who were quickly engulfed by the waters. Just as they were about to drown, their son, who had been standing guard outside, experienced his first true crisis and, quite accidentally, saved the day. By pure luck, Alex knocked over a large stone pillar in the temple. The falling pillars triggered a chain reaction, with the final one breaking through the tomb's wall, allowing the water to flow out and rescuing his trapped parents. However, the couple didn't realize that after they entered the chamber, 3 mercenaries had followed, watching their every move. Far away, at the ruins of the City of the Dead, a construction team was busy digging. The project had 3 overseers, the curator of the British Museum, the head of security, and the reincarnation of Anxunaman. Anxunaman's reincarnation shared a unique trait with Evelyn. They could both recall memories from their past lives. Under Anxunaman's precise guidance, they successfully uncovered the Book of the Dead and the Book of Ammonius-Ra. Though O'Connell had killed and buried the high priest, Anxunaman still sought to resurrect him. Meanwhile, the 3 mercenaries arrived at the ruins to report back to their employer, but as soon as they stepped out of the car, the entire City of the Dead began to tremble violently. The workers, who had been digging day and night, accidentally unearthed a swarm of flesh-eating scarabs. Terrified, everyone panicked and ran for their lives. Many were devoured by the scarabs, but Anck-su-namun smiled slightly, knowing this meant she was close to finding the high priest. Her men used flamethrowers to drive away the scarabs, allowing the workers to continue digging. As predicted, they soon unearthed a massive piece of amber. The curator was ecstatic. Inside was the mummified high priest, who had been sealed there 3,000 years ago. The curator, a devout follower of the high priest, had come here with the sole intention of resurrecting him. They also wanted to awaken the Scorpion King and summon the army of Anubis. Their plan was to have the high priest kill the Scorpion King, take control of his army, and rule the world. But they were still missing one crucial item: the bracelet of Anubis. Only with the bracelet could they find and awaken the Scorpion King. However, the three mercenary brothers reported that they had not obtained the bracelet of Anubis and that it had likely been taken to London. Seeing that they failed their mission and were still causing trouble, the curator was not angry but instead assigned them a new task: to retrieve the box that once contained the Book of the Dead. This was because, after the high priest's resurrection, he would need to consume the flesh of the one who opened the box to restore his body and powers, so he could kill the Scorpion King. Upon learning that the bracelet of Anubis was now in O'Connell's possession, the curator decided to personally lead the mission to seize it. O'Connell and his family had returned to their mansion in London, unaware that danger was approaching. While his parents were distracted, Alex secretly opened the box and put on the flashy bracelet of Anubis. To his surprise, the moment he put it on, the bracelet projected a holographic map. It swiftly passed through the Sheer Desert and its oasis, leaving Alex stunned as it seemed to be guiding him. The image eventually froze, stopping at the Scorpion King's lair, but he didn't realize that wearing the bracelet of Anubis would cause the Scorpion King to awaken within 7 days. Alex, knowing he'd made a huge mistake, tried to take off the bracelet but found that it was firmly fixed to his wrist and wouldn't come off. Fearing his mother's scolding, Alex hastily placed a figurine inside the box to cover his tracks. Meanwhile, O'Connell and Evelyn were enjoying a quiet moment when they discovered a strange woman's lingerie in the house. O'Connell immediately thought of Jonathan, and sure enough, Jonathan had brought a woman home. Just as he was boasting to the woman, the curator and his men burst in. They mistook Jonathan for O'Connell and interrogated him about the whereabouts of the bracelet of Anubis. The curator snatched the golden staff from Jonathan's hand, recognizing it as the legendary Spear of Judgment. Dressed seductively, Anck-su-namun entered the room and pulled out an Egyptian cobra from a box. After kissing the snake, she brought it close to Jonathan, threatening him for information about the bracelet. Jonathan, terrified and clueless, closed his eyes and braced for death. At the critical moment, O'Connell arrived just in time to find Jonathan being held at knife point by a group of red-clad assassins. Realizing they'd mistaken Jonathan for O'Connell, Anck-su-namun threw the venomous snake at O'Connell. The red-clad assassin hurled a blade, but O'Connell turned the tables and defeated him in the same move. Impressed by O'Connell's skills, another assassin grabbed a machine gun and opened fire wildly. Under the barrage of heavy fire, O'Connell was forced to dodge, while Jonathan managed to reclaim his Spear of Judgment amid the chaos. The captain and his men cornered Evelyn, intending to take the bracelet of Anubis from her. Evelyn drew her sword, protecting her son, but at the crucial moment, the pharaoh's tomb guards, who had been in hiding, revealed themselves and engaged the red-clad assassins in battle. Since her journey in Egypt, Evelyn had learned some hand-to-hand combat skills. Seeing this, the captain drew his blade and faced off with one of the tomb guards, quickly gaining the upper hand. Despite Evelyn's best efforts, she was overwhelmed, and both she and the box were carried off by the enemies. As his men succeeded, the captain slashed his opponent and made a stylish exit. But what they didn't know was that the bracelet of Anubis was actually on Evelyn's son. With O'Connell and Jonathan pinned down by enemy fire, they had no choice but to jump out of a window to escape. Seeing Evelyn and the box being taken away, O'Connell was frantic and tried to pursue them but was forced back by gunfire. When O'Connell noticed the tomb guards, he vented his frustration on them, believing they were responsible for the trouble. The tomb guards then revealed the curator's plan to resurrect the high priest and rule the world. As everyone worried, Alex rolled up his sleeve, revealing that the bracelet was still on his wrist, reassuring them. But the tomb guard warned O'Connell that whoever wears the bracelet must reach the pyramid of Sheer within 7 days, or Anubis would claim his son's soul. O'Connell decided they would first go to the British Museum to rescue his wife and stop the curator's plan. They soon arrived at the museum. Before they launched their rescue mission, the tomb guard noticed the tattoo on O'Connell's arm and told him it was the mark of the pharaoh's bodyguard. This meant that O'Connell was a descendant of the pharaoh's guards, but O'Connell heard his words and refused to acknowledge his connection with the pharaoh's guards. He grabbed his weapon, ready to save his wife. Meanwhile, in the Egyptian artifacts section of the museum, Evelyn was tightly bound and carried to the altar, surrounded by a group of devoted worshippers. The curator, holding the Book of the Dead, was conducting the summoning ritual, chanting incantations in a loud voice. In the next second, a mummy broke free from the amber before them. It was none other than the bold and fearless high priest of ancient Egypt, Imhotep, resurrected once again in his mummy form. As Imhotep regained consciousness, he found the surroundings unfamiliar. The curator, upon seeing Imhotep, immediately called him father, saying now was the perfect time to kill the Scorpion King, which would give them control over the army of Anubis and allow them to rule the world. He had even prepared 2 grand gifts for Imhotep. The first was Imhotep's beloved woman from long ago, Anxunamun. Evelyn, still bound, once again saw visions from the past. The graceful woman in front of her transformed into the image of the Egyptian queen. It turned out that she was the reincarnation of Anxunamun, the pharaoh's consort. Anxunamun walked up to Imhotep, and they gazed into each other's eyes with deep affection. Seeing the reincarnation of Anxunamun made Imhotep even happier. Now, he could finally achieve both his ambitions and his love. Although this was only Anxunamun's physical reincarnation, he was confident he would eventually summon her soul back from the underworld. This time, no one could stop them from being together forever. The second grand gift was the bracelet of Anubis, but when the curator and the captain excitedly opened the box, they were shocked to find that the bracelet had been switched. Furious, they realized Alex must have been the one to steal it. Luckily, they had kidnapped Evelyn, so their efforts weren't entirely in vain. To stir things up, Anxunamun ordered her men to burn Evelyn alive, knowing that Imhotep had a grudge against Evelyn and would be pleased to watch her burn. Just as Evelyn was about to be thrown into the fire pit, O'Connell arrived just in time, leaping forward and rescuing his wife from the flames. At the same time, the Medjay warriors accompanying O'Connell pulled out machine guns and started firing at Imhotep and his followers. The scene instantly became chaotic, and Imhotep locked eyes with O'Connell, his enemy. Rage boiled between them. Without hesitation, O'Connell shot Imhotep twice and then handed the gun to Evelyn. Together, they mowed down their enemies. The Medjay's only mission was to prevent Imhotep's resurrection, but their bullets couldn't kill him. The 3 of them had no choice but to retreat. Furious at the uselessness of his followers, Imhotep grabbed a mystical artifact and cast a spell. He summoned his mummy guards to chase down O'Connell and his group. Fortunately, when they reached the museum exit, Jonathan arrived with a double-decker bus to rescue them. As it turned out, Jonathan had heard the fighting and, in his panic to start the car, had accidentally broken the key. So, they had no choice but to flee in the stolen bus. For powerful mummies burst through the walls and pursued O'Connell and his group. Shockingly, the mummies on foot were faster than the bus. O'Connell, seeing this, tried to use firepower to stop them, but the mummies didn't follow the normal rules, bouncing and leaping over obstacles with incredible speed. Equally surprising was the full-force assault by O'Connell and the Medjay warriors. They barely managed to blow up 2 of the mummies, but the remaining ones continued their relentless pursuit. The group found themselves trapped, as the mummies quickly caught up with the bus and stormed inside, launching a brutal assault on the Medjay warriors. Even worse, the mummies were strong enough to tear the bus apart with their bare hands. O'Connell didn't even have time to reload before he was pinned down by a mummy. The mummy picked up O'Connell and slammed him around. Meanwhile, the Medjay on the lower deck were also struggling. A mummy had viciously attacked one of them, leaving him covered in wounds and on the verge of death. Fortunately, Evelyn acted fast, grabbing O'Connell's gun and unloading several rounds into the mummy, turning it to dust. On the upper deck, O'Connell was still fighting alone, but this last mummy was difficult to defeat. O'Connell gave everything he had, but nothing could hurt the mummy. Just as he was about to collapse, he noticed a bridge ahead and quickly ducked down. The mummy, along with the roof of the bus, crashed into the bridge, finally giving O'Connell a moment of relief. With the mummies dealt with, the rescue mission was a success. Just as Alex thought he could finally rest, the captain appeared from behind and kidnapped him. O'Connell gave chase, but they got away, leaving him devastated as he collapsed on the bridge. Crying in frustration, the the Magi reassured him, saying the captain's goal was only the bracelet of Anubis. The bracelet revealed a new location on the map each time they arrived somewhere, so Alex was still safe for now. Only the person wearing the bracelet could follow its guidance. It became clear that the kidnappers planned to use Alex and the bracelet to find the Scorpion King's pyramid. In addition, the curator accidentally discovered that Jonathan possessed the Spear of Osiris, which could subdue Imhotep. But for Imhotep, once he regained his powers, he would no longer fear the weapon. After saying this, he couldn't resist kissing the reincarnation of Anxunamun. Imhotep and his group then took Alex on a train bound for the ancient city of Karnak. Alex, wanting to buy time for his parents to rescue him, was brought before Imhotep, as he was the one chosen by the bracelet of Anubis. Imhotep didn't plan to kill him. Instead, he revealed the truth of the curse. If Alex didn't reach the pyramid of Ahm-Shir within 7 days of the bracelet's activation, his soul would be taken by the bracelet. Now, only 5 days remained to ensure the boy cooperated. Imhotep removed his mask. Imhotep also had a weakness only the army of Anubis could compensate for it. However, in his current mummy form, Imhotep was not fully resurrected and needed to retrieve the Book of the Dead to fully restore his powers, which would only happen by draining the life of whoever opened the chest. The 3 mercenary brothers completed their task and retrieved the chest containing the Book of the Dead. Though it had a curse, whoever opened it would die. One of the men dared not open it, but the greedy eldest brother wanted to raise the price or sell the chest to someone else. Seeing how difficult they were being, Anxunamun tricked them into entering Imhotep's room to collect their reward. While they were distracted, she shut the door, and Imhotep jumped out, terrifying them. In their panic, they shot at Imhotep, but their bullets did nothing to harm him. Much to his amusement, one of them, terrified, tried to flee, but Anxunamun tricked him into opening the chest, telling him that Imhotep would let him go. Foolishly, the mercenary opened the chest, releasing Imhotep's powers. Following the curse, Imhotep devoured their flesh and blood, fully restoring his body and limitless powers. After his feast, Anxunamun returned and saw that Imhotep had transformed into a handsome bald man, causing her heart to race. To reach the destination ahead of Imhotep, Okamel sought out his old Air Force friend to fly a homemade aircraft into the desert to save his son, Alex. The Air Force friend initially refused to get involved, having been tricked by Okamel before and not wanting to risk his life again. But this time, Okamel bribed him with Jonathan's Spear of Osiris, convincing him to join the mission. To ensure the plan's success, the Magi summoned the captain of the Pharaoh's guard to accompany them. Once the Scorpion King was awakened, the army of Anubis would return to the world. They needed to prepare by gathering all forces to fight Anubis' army. Their method of communication was through the Magi's pet eagle. They then took off in a hot air balloon, sailing under the stars as if navigating the ocean. Okamel promised Evelyn that he would bring their son back. Meanwhile, Imhotep's group traveled by train across the desert to the city of Karnak. Alex caused trouble in front of the captain, who was fed up but still needed Alex's guidance and couldn't kill him. Using the excuse of needing to use the bathroom, Alex distracted the captain. He found a large hole beneath the toilet, moved the seat, and pulled the emergency brake, escaping through the hole. By now, Imhotep's powers had grown stronger. He casually grabbed 2 of his men and tested his abilities, then easily teleported to Alex's side, capturing him once more. He then brought Anxunamun into the city of Karnak, though she only had fragments of her past life memories. Imhotep, unsatisfied, began using magic to restore all of Anxunamun's memories from her previous life. Meanwhile, Evelyn, on the hot air balloon, became dizzy again, also affected by the magic. Her past life memories slowly resurfaced. 2 Egyptian women in revealing outfits, armed with weapons and wearing golden masks, were engaged in an intense and seductive duel in the temple. At first, they were evenly matched, but one woman used her agile legs to kick the other in the head, knocking her down, quickly winning the first round. Even the pharaoh applauded, and the woman lying on the ground lifted her mask, revealing it was Evelyn. It turned out Evelyn's past life was the daughter of the pharaoh, and the other woman was Anxunamun, the pharaoh's most beloved concubine. Evelyn and Anxunamun had always been bitter rivals. This duel was for the right to guard the bracelet of Anubis. Unwilling to concede, Evelyn engaged Anxunamun again. Despite changing weapons several times, Evelyn was still no match for Anxunamun. In the end, she suffered a heavy over-the-shoulder throw from Anxunamun, losing the battle. This exciting and thrilling fight ended with Evelyn defeated by Anxunamun, but she remained her father's most trusted person, tasked with guarding the bracelet of Anubis. This was also why Evelyn was able to find the bracelet of Anubis so easily. At that time, Anxunamun and Imhotep were already showing signs of an unusual relationship. Evelyn's instincts as a woman told her something was going on between them. Sure enough, that night, Evelyn discovered Imhotep and Anxunamun secretly meeting in the pharaoh's chamber. It clearly wasn't their first time. When the pharaoh learned of this, he planned to catch them in the act. However, the two, with nothing to lose, decided to assassinate him. Evelyn witnessed the whole thing and rushed to alert the pharaoh's guard. But sadly, her father was still killed by the two. To cover Imhotep's escape, Anxunamun chose to commit suicide. In the end, Imhotep couldn't escape either, being turned into a mummy and cursed with the most terrible of curses. It turned out the grudge between these three had been sealed 3,000 years ago. This painful memory overwhelmed Evelyn, causing her to fall from the aircraft. Fortunately, O'Connell caught her just in time, saving her. With these long-buried memories now resurfaced, Imhotep used the Book of the Dead to successfully summon Anxunamun's soul from the underworld back into her body. Anxunamun fully regained her memories, and their love became as unwavering as it was in their past life. But this ritual had an unexpected side effect. It awakened all of Evelyn's memories from her past life. Evelyn was the reincarnated princess and the guardian of the bracelet of Anubis. O'Connell, on the other hand, was the guard assigned to escort the princess, and their son, Alex, was the guide chosen by the bracelet of Anubis, leading them to the oasis of Shir. Alex, shackled in chains, had no chance to escape, but he was clever, pretending to agree to guide Imhotep while secretly leaving clues along the way. Believing his parents would surely rescue him, the group finally found Imhotep's train but discovered it was already abandoned. They had taken Alex and were walking toward their destination. Evelyn quickly spotted the clues left by her son, and sure enough, the bracelet of Anubis acted like a holographic guide, leading them step by step to the Scorpion King's lair. Alex used sandcastles to mark each stop, allowing his parents to track him. These holographic images were of ancient ruins, and since Evelyn was an expert in archaeology, they were able to precisely follow Imhotep's group. The Medjay also sent these messages via falcon to the other captains. The escort army followed closely behind Imhotep's group. A few days later, guided by the bracelet of Anubis, Imhotep's group was nearing the Scorpion King's oasis. They only had to pass through a canyon to reach their destination, but when Imhotep looked up, he saw O'Connell and his team flying towards them. Alex was just about to leave his final clue when the captain caught him. Furious, the captain grabbed Alex, but Imhotep didn't care. He stood in the river, preparing a powerful attack to properly deal with O'Connell and his crew. With a surge of power, the river formed a 100-foot-tall water wall. With a single push, the water rushed back up the canyon towards O'Connell's airship. On the airship, everyone exchanged nervous glances as an eerie calm surrounded them. The pilot was on high alert and, when he turned, saw the massive wave barreling towards them. Just before they were swallowed by the wave, the pilot slammed the throttle, pushing the airship to its limits. Smoke trailed behind them as they barely escaped the canyon. By chance, they arrived at Shir, and through binoculars, O'Connell spotted a pyramid in the oasis, which likely held the Scorpion King's tomb. But before they could act, Imhotep summoned the tsunami again. The pilot tried the same maneuver, but this time, they were running low on fuel. The airship couldn't outrun the wave and was eventually swallowed by it. The group crashed into the oasis, but luckily, everyone survived. The airship, however, was damaged and needed repairs. O'Connell left the pilot to fix it while the rest continued towards the oasis to rescue Alex. Jonathan, ever the opportunist, quietly swiped the spear of Osiris before they left. The Medjay sent out a message with his falcon, just before being shot by the captain. At O'Connell's urging, the Medjay decided to help O'Connell rescue his son first, then personally inform the 12 Medjay captains. On the 6th night, Imhotep's group entered Shir and approached the pyramid at the center of the oasis. O'Connell's group planned a surprise attack under the cover of night. Evelyn and Jonathan stayed behind to provide support from the high ground, unaware that the oasis was full of danger. Near the pyramid, the ground was teeming with dwarf mummies, the ancient guardians of the oasis. Imhotep's followers were the first to be attacked. Before they knew what was happening, they were dragged underground one by one and killed. Hearing the commotion, O'Connell and the Medjay rushed forward. The dwarf mummies, fearing Imhotep's immense power, didn't dare approach him. Imhotep abandoned everyone and rushed towards the pyramid with Anxunamun. The rest of the group wasn't as fortunate and were picked off. Terrified and in complete disarray, the more panicked they were, the worse things became. Some were hit by poison darts fired by the dwarf mummies, while others fell into swamps. The mummies were unstoppable, shrieking with excitement as they tore through Imhotep's followers, leaving O'Connell with no choice but to press on. Amid the chaos, Alex broke free and hid in the bushes. O'Connell and the Medjai charged into the fray, while Evelyn and Jonathan provided cover from the shadows. The captain caught up to Alex and was about to strike when O'Connell leaped out, grabbed his son, and sprinted away. The Medjai stayed behind to settle his score with the captain. In a swift, vengeful strike, the Medjai sent the captain to his death, then set off to inform the 12 Medjai captains. The curator, shocked that his army had been decimated before even reaching the pyramid, was the only one left standing. O'Connell, carrying his son, sprinted as the dwarf mummies chased after them. He quickly turned and fired his gun. After a fierce battle, the family was finally reunited, but before they could celebrate, Alex delivered bad news. The bracelet of Anubis had already chosen its master. If he didn't reach the pyramid before dawn, he would be doomed. At that moment, the persistent dwarf mummies attacked once more. The entire family was chased across a narrow bridge, but even after crossing to the other side, they couldn't shake their pursuers. O'Connell lit a stick of dynamite and tossed it back, intending to blow up the bridge. One of the mummies caught it, mistaking it for a torch, and the others scrambled to grab it. Suddenly, the dynamite exploded, cutting the bridge in half and sending the charred mummies plummeting into the canyon. But the danger wasn't over yet. It was almost dawn, the 7th day. If they didn't get Alex inside the pyramid before sunrise, the bracelet's curse would take his life. O'Connell wasted no time, throwing his son over his shoulder and sprinting towards the pyramid with the speed of an Olympic runner. The sunlight was shrinking fast, and O'Connell held his son close, dodging it as best as he could. They were just a hair's breadth away from being engulfed in the light when, at the last second, they dashed inside the Scorpion King's tomb, barely escaping with their lives. With the curse lifted, the bracelet of Anubis unlocked itself from Alex's wrist, and he immediately threw the cursed thing away. Evelyn, arriving shortly after, breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing her son safe. It looked like the family could finally go home in peace, but unexpectedly, Imhotep and Anxunamun arrived right behind them. Anxunamun, still holding on to her grudge from her past life, suddenly stabbed Evelyn from behind, hitting a vital spot. Evelyn didn't even have time to react. O'Connell, seeing this, rushed out in a frenzy, but it was too late. After getting her revenge, Anxunamun left with Imhotep. They strolled leisurely into the pyramid, heading straight for the Scorpion King's chamber. O'Connell watched helplessly as his wife lay on the ground, slowly losing her life. The family, who had just been reunited, was once again plunged into sorrow as O'Connell held his wife's body, unable to shed a single tear. But now wasn't the time for mourning. He knew the most important task was to stop the Scorpion King's resurrection. Resolute, O'Connell charged into the pyramid. Meanwhile, the curator found the discarded bracelet of Anubis and picked it up. Ecstatic, he ventured into an underground chamber. Arriving at the Scorpion King's tomb, he put on the bracelet of Anubis, using it to drive away the flesh-eating scarabs, and soon discovered the sealed Scorpion King. Determined to fulfill his dream of world domination, the curator decided to awaken the Scorpion King himself. He placed the bracelet of Anubis into the Scorpion King's statue, and the seal was immediately broken. The once dark tomb transformed into solid gold. A mysterious force spread through the corridors, reaching the exterior of the pyramid, where a giant black scorpion hovered in the sky, signaling the imminent return of the great Scorpion King. The skies and earth began to shift, and the shadow of a colossal scorpion enveloped the entire desert. The Medjai, who had anticipated this, had already gathered a massive army of Pharaoh's guards to protect Egypt's peace. The curator was still reveling in the success of awakening the Scorpion King when he suddenly felt excruciating pain and screamed in agony. He hadn't expected the resurrection to require his flesh and blood. As a sacrifice, his hand was being devoured, leaving only bare bones. Fortunately, the awakening ritual was successful, and the army of Anubis was the first to rise. The dog-headed soldiers of Anubis, now reanimated, squared off against the Medjai-led guard army. As Imhotep stepped into the throne room, he initially planned to use his magic to defeat the Scorpion King, but then, the god Anubis suddenly stripped him of his powers. Under the curse of the god, all mortals had to face the Scorpion King as mere humans if they wished to command the army of Anubis. It was clear that to lead the million-strong army of Anubis, they had to fight as humans. Anxunamun tried to convince Imhotep to give up, but driven by ambition, Imhotep refused to back down. He had to fight, not just for his future with Anxunamun, but for the power he craved. Fearlessly, Imhotep charged forward to challenge the Scorpion King. Meanwhile, Jonathan comforted Alex, telling him that his mother had gone to a better place. Just like the book said. Hearing that, Alex suddenly remembered that the Book of the Dead was in Anxunamun's possession. If they could retrieve it, they could bring his mother back to life. So, he urged his uncle to carry his mother's body into the Scorpion King's tomb and find Anxunamun. Jonathan, swinging his fist at Anxunamun, distracted her while Alex quietly swiped the Book of the Dead and began chanting the spell to summon his mother's soul. Evelyn, now revived, told Jonathan to take Alex and leave, while she stayed behind to settle her past life grudge with Anxunamun. The two women squared off once again, but this time the outcome was different. Evelyn slashed Anxunamun's face, quickly gaining the upper hand. Anxunamun, unwilling to continue the fight, turned and fled. Meanwhile, Imhotep was banging on the doors of the Scorpion King's chamber, challenging him to a duel. Hearing the noise, O'Connell rushed in, seething with rage. Without a word, he swung a massive axe at Imhotep. The two engaged in a fierce battle. Even though Imhotep had lost his magical powers, his physical strength was still formidable. For a while, the fight was evenly matched. At the same time, outside the pyramid, the Medjai and the army of Anubis clashed in an all-out war. Millions of soldiers fought fiercely, with the Anubis warriors turning to dust when defeated, but they were still able to inflict damage with their axes. The battle raged intensely outside while the fight inside the pyramid was equally fierce. But then, the doors of the Scorpion King's chamber slowly opened, revealing a creature with the upper body of a man and the lower body of a scorpion. He was the Scorpion King. Now, having evolved into a half-human, half-beast monster, he was clearly not someone to be trifled with. Whoever could defeat him would gain command of Anubis' million-strong army. To everyone's surprise, Imhotep suddenly knelt down. Using his knowledge of the ancient language, Imhotep told the Scorpion King that O'Connell was there to challenge him, and that he, Imhotep, would gladly serve as the Scorpion King's loyal servant. The Scorpion King turned his gaze toward O'Connell. Unable to withstand the Scorpion King's immense power, O'Connell was forced to fight and retreat at the same time. Using his agility, O'Connell dodged and evaded the Scorpion King, only to stumble upon the unlucky curator. The Scorpion King, ruthless and brutal, grabbed the curator without hesitation. Even in death, the curator remained loyal to Imhotep. But Imhotep didn't care about his fate. The poor curator, after all his efforts to revive the Scorpion King, ended up being torn apart. Outside the pyramid, the pharaoh's guards continued to battle the army of Anubis. Each guard fought valiantly, and soon they defeated the army of Anubis. Just as they were ready to celebrate, a massive disturbance caught the Medjai's attention. Looking beyond the hill, they were shocked to see another wave of the Anubis army charging toward them, larger than before. It turned out that the previous wave had only been a vanguard. The main army was now descending like a flood. If this continued, they would all either be killed or exhausted to death. The only way to stop it was to kill the Scorpion King. While evading the Scorpion King, O'Connell stumbled upon a wall carving and realized that he was indeed a descendant of the pharaoh's guards. The prophecy said that only the spear of Osiris could kill the Scorpion King, and coincidentally, Jonathan had the very spear in his possession. Even more fortuitous, Jonathan showed up at that moment with the spear. O'Connell quickly explained the spear's purpose to his brother-in-law, but before they could act, the Scorpion King resumed his pursuit. At the same time, the second wave of the Anubis army launched their attack, swarming the battlefield once again. The pharaoh's guards, now facing overwhelming numbers, were prepared to die in battle. Inside the pyramid, O'Connell was still being chased by the Scorpion King when his revived wife arrived. Energized by her return, O'Connell stopped running and faced the Scorpion King head-on, calling for Jonathan to throw him the spear of Osiris, but Jonathan didn't know how to activate it. Fortunately, with Alex's help, They finally managed to unlock the spear and hurled it at the Scorpion King. Unexpectedly, Imhotep intercepted it mid-air. He had overheard their conversation earlier. Imhotep believed he was the chosen one to kill the Scorpion King, so he hurled the spear at him, but at the last second, O'Connell managed to snatch the spear from him. In a bold move, O'Connell drove the spear of Osiris straight into the Scorpion King's chest. Imhotep, frustrated beyond belief, realized that his dream of ruling the world had been shattered. O'Connell reclaimed control of the army of Anubis, commanding them to return to the underworld. The Scorpion King let out a furious roar as he disintegrated into a black cloud, and the army of Anubis outside the pyramid vanished with him, returning to the underworld. Cheers of victory echoed across the desert, but with the Scorpion King's death, a massive black vortex formed over the oasis, threatening to swallow everything. The pyramid began to crumble, and the ground split open, revealing a bottomless abyss that consumed the Scorpion King and his army. It also left O'Connell and Imhotep hanging on the edge of the cliff, while countless demonic spirits from the abyss below clung to them, trying to drag them into hell. It was a moment of ultimate test. Stones were falling all around them, and Evelyn and Anxunam. As Imhotep compared himself to the loving couple, O'Connell and Evelyn, he realized how thoroughly he had lost. His face was filled with sorrow, his eyes burning with anger, hurt, and a deep, tearless despair. The crushing weight of his defeat left him utterly broken, and in the end, he chose to let go, turning around and plunging into the endless abyss below. A love that had endured for 3,000 years ended in tragedy, but Anxunamun didn't escape for long. In her panic, she stumbled into a pit swarming with scorpions and lost her life. O'Connell and his family escaped the pyramid, only to discover that the oasis, due to the broken curse, was being reclaimed by the god Anubis, rapidly reverting back into a barren desert. The pyramid itself became like a black hole, devouring everything around it. It wouldn't be long before the family, too, would be swallowed by the desert. Despite their desperate race to the top of the pyramid, their efforts were in vain. The top was already sinking into the ground, leaving them with no way out. Just as all hope seemed lost, the pilot arrived in his hot air balloon just in time to rescue them. One by one, everyone climbed aboard, but Jonathan, the last to board, risked his life to steal a giant gemstone from the side of the pyramid. In the end, the group escaped safely, flying out of the desert, where they were greeted by the approaching Medjai riders. After exchanging farewells, the group began their journey home.